Hi, I'm Johnny Baier, the Executive Director of the American Banjo Museum in Oklahoma City. It's a real treat today to be visiting with one of our 2020 Hall of Fame inductees, Fast Eddie Erickson from out in California way. Eddie is one of these guys who is without a doubt one of the most respected, universally respected Plectrum banjo players in the world. He's equally at home with the jazz guitar. He can pass all that off and become a great vocalist, touch his audience with his vocals. And when all else fails, he's the funniest guy in any room at any given moment. Eddie, welcome to the American Banjo Museum.
I am so honored, Johnny. Thank you so much for having me and making this happen.
It's long overdue. You've been on my short list for a long time, and you've got a lot of friends and supporters out there who really are the ones who made it happen. So congratulations to you.
Well, I thank them all. It's such an honor, Johnny, really. I'm the kind of guy that has been playing for over 50 years and just in the trenches playing gigs, get whatever I get a call for, I do it, and no matter how ridiculous, and there have been some ridiculous ones, I'll say. But it's all been an incredible ride.
Hey, let's start at the beginning. You talked about your dad being an inspiration as a guitar player, kind of a closet guitar player. How did that first click with you as far as becoming a musician yourself? And what were the very earliest experiences you had as a musician?
You know, all through my childhood, there was music playing on the radio. And it was always the 30s and the 40s stuff. And sometimes they would even go into the 50s. Oh my gosh. But my parents loved old music. They loved music, period. And so my dad would play guitar, and how he put it, he played for his own amazement. But he really was an amateur guitar player, and but he played in a senior band. I got interested watching him play, and it looked like a fun thing to do. And I got a ukulele at 7 years old and played for about 3 months or so, and got bored with it. And I put it on my bureau and shot BBs through it. And I still have the ukulele. And I even put Vega. I knew what Vega meant. It was a great banjo and guitar maker. So in gold paint, I scrolled Vega with an A, V-A-G-A. And I still have that gold paint on there. But then I got interested in banjo when I saw one hanging up in a music store, and I asked my parents for a Christmas gift, and that was it. And my father said, "No, I'm going to get your baritone ukulele. That's it." You know, so I figured, okay, whatever my parents want. So at Christmas time, I opened up the case, and there was a tenor banjo, and I was thrilled. I didn't know tenor from Plectrum, nor did my dad, and or my mom. And so we kind of learned together. My dad got the banjo bug. And he took lessons from Bill Hendricks. I don't know if you remember him or not. An incredible, the fastest right hand I think I've ever seen. He was just, he was a good teacher for my dad. And so what my dad learned, and I would sit in on lessons and things like that, but not playing, just listening. And so my dad did that for just not too long, a couple of months, but he got the bug. So we would go to all the Shakey's pizza parlors and all the Me and Ed's pizza parlors, and witness piano and banjo. And it just inspired me. Whether the banjoist was great or not, it was just something I wanted to do. And it planted the bug in me to want to learn how to play. I got the tenor banjo, I paid for it myself. They put a down payment on it. And in order to hold my interest, they said, you should pay for it. So I paid. It was a $250 banjo, brand new. It was a Vega, but a basic. And so I paid $150 of it and my paper route. And I took lessons in San Jose downtown from a Filipino guy, a great musician, but I could not understand what he said. It was unbelievable. He taught everything from accordion to zither. I mean, it was everything. He was a marvelous teacher, but I couldn't understand him, and especially at my age, 12 or 13. So I asked my parents, I said, can I just get a book and I'll learn it. I'll learn the banjo. And I went in what we call the back room, locked the door for 8 months, and came out a banjoist.
Wow.
Like putting a pie in the oven. yeah, I would, instead of going out and play with the guys and play basketball, baseball, or the sports and things, and just goof around, I was really intent on learning how to play. So I got records, and I would play along with Louis Armstrong and Eddie Peabody. One guy that really inspired me was Perry Bechtel, who was such an inspiration. I got the chance to meet him. He had had a stroke when I met him, but he was still, able to talk and communicate. And it was just such an honor to meet him, because he really, really influenced my playing and the way I approached the banjo. So, and then I got going back a little bit on the tenor banjo, I got a job at Mia Ned's Pizza Parlor, speaking of Mia Ned's. And it was an audition, and I got the job. So I played every Friday and Saturday for 2 weeks. And then I got fired because they thought I was older. I looked older at 15, and they thought I was 18. They served beer and wine, so they couldn't have a minor working for them. But it was an interesting shot. I remember doing the rehearsal. There was one guy ahead of me, and he played electric guitar, and he had the maracas, and he had thimbles on his knees, and he was a one-man band, and he was singing, and and he got so flustered and there were a couple of people dancing actually, and he was doing Spanish Eyes or something, and he was able to do the maracas, and he had the amplifier turned up enough so if he just touched the strings, you could hear the chords. But he got rattled, and his maraca hit the ground, hit the dance floor, broke all over the place. Beads went all over the place, and the dancers started, and none of them were slipping over the beads, the innards of the maraca. And it was the funniest thing. Anyway, that job lasted 2 weeks, and but I was thrilled to get it and have it, just as a memory. And it got the Plectrum banjo came into my mind, I guess, when I heard Eddie Peabody, and I was wondering why my banjo tenor sounded so different than his. So I realized they're two different, at least, the Plectrum banjo, there's a Plectrum out there. So my dad got a Plectrum banjo he had that he traded for. It was like a console, 1950s console that had the AM and FM turntable and a piece of furniture for the living room. And he got it for $25. He went up to a friend of his, and he had the Bacon and Day that I still play. He had this little guy. He was a small person, a wonderful guy, Bill Escobar. And he said, "What can I do to get that banjo?" My dad asked, and he said, "I want that piece of furniture with the turntable and everything that my dad paid $25 for." So they said, "Okay, deal." So we got the Bacon and Day #1, and he got his $25 console. So that's the banjo I've been playing all these years, and it's my baby. I love it. It feels so right. The neck is perfect. It's wonderful.
So many of us banjo players go through instruments like internet passwords, and
Yeah.
to hear of somebody that's played the same banjo for their whole career, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I have an extra one in case so I had a spare Bacon that I used, but it was nothing like my baby. But yeah, it's seen the world, and if it could talk, oh my gosh. I have to tell you what got me. I would not be here. I would not have children. I wouldn't have grandchildren, and I wouldn't. My life would be different. I'd probably be selling computer chips or something, or maybe whatever. But my dad is stopped at this friend of his in Los Gatos who played trombone, very amateur. It was an amateur Dixieland band, and he owned the bar. So my dad was a little bit overserved. I was driving him around. I was 19, 20, something like that. And he said, "Let's go to Scarlet LaRue's." And I said, "Oh, okay, what the heck." So we went to park the truck, and we went in, and my dad always had the banjo in the back of the truck. He always carried it with him. So we went in, we heard the first set, and it was really exciting for me. I mean, I probably shouldn't have been there because I was only 20 and it was a bar, But anyway, my dad says, he stands up and says, "My son plays banjo. You ought to have him up there." And I'm pulling him down. "Please, Dad, please don't do that. No. So anyway, I met Bob Lashley on the break. He invited me up to play. I finished the second set with him. And he said, you've got to go see Dick O'Kane at the Warehouse in Monterey on Cannery Row. Well, if we hadn't stopped at that bar on that night, I probably would have never gone there on my own because I was too young. But I went to the Warehouse the next weekend, and I introduced myself to the owner, Dick O'Kane. And he said, you want to sit in? I said, absolutely. So I sat in. He played washboard badly, but a great guy. And he turned to me and he said, you want a job? And I said, sure. He said, okay, $12.50 a night. And so at the end of the job, at the end of the set, he said, make it 15. So I got $15 a night, and I was thrilled. It was 4 nights a week starting, back in 1969. And it was the start of something. Just, I had no idea that it was going to be my career. I just thought I'll do this for a while and go back to college. So that didn't happen. Disneyland came around, and Sonny Anderson saw me at the Warehouse and asked if I would like to do a summer show at Disney World. And I said, I would love to. Oh my gosh. So my wife and I bought a motorhome, and we drove across country in a 19-foot motorhome, thinking that we loved each other. And we did, and we do still. But we lived in the motorhome for 7 months while we did the Easter show and the summer show at the class of 27 at the Diamond Horseshoe. Well,
you started on Disney. Let's get some, how should we say, perspective. Disney was a lot different in those days than it is right now. And you came in when they were teeming with nostalgia entertainment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it was a great time. Just kind of reflect on that so people know exactly what you walked into when you went to the class of 27 show.
Yeah. Well, Sonny Helmer wrote the show. He was a trombone player and a huge character. I mean, I love, just to this day, he's still alive selling his memoirs in some flea market on the weekends. And from what I hear, he's just a kick. He always has been. But he wrote the class of 27, and in the daytime, we would do the Banjo Kings at Disneyland. We're talking Disneyland now. So we do how many sets, of Banjo Kings, and then we have a couple hours off, and then we go do the Golden Horseshoe at Disneyland, and we do 5 shows of the class of 27. Sonny Helmer would come out and he'd do things like mother and spell it out with his hands and his arms, spell the words out. And he had a tutu on and tights and a big, a blonde wig with curls. And, I was in hog heaven. I had to pinch myself all the time. Here I am actually doing this in front of people. And all the people, it was always a jammed scene. I mean, all the seats were taken up. And it was so much fun, and because the people enjoyed it so much that it was a yin yang thing. We all enjoyed it so much, and the band was Lee Westenhofer, Westy, mm-hmm. and Bob Raggio on washboard. Jerry Holton on banjo, tenor, guitar tuned banjo and tenor, and Sonny Helmer. And we had 2 flapper gals, one of which was Banu Gibson. So it was a free-for-all, wonderful experience. And like you say, it was a different time. I haven't been to Disneyland 30 years, I don't think. It's been a long, long time. But I can only assume that since they're now limited live bands, the nostalgia is not what it used to be.
Right, and once more, it never was.
Yeah. And it was, I just got in at the right time. I really did. And the people seemed to enjoy it, and I enjoyed the people in the audience. It was a ball.
Now, you bounced between Disneyland and the Walt Disney World Resort, ultimately ended up over at the Empress Lilly.
Yes.
Tell us about those days, because that had to be a highlight time at Disney World.
Oh, it was the start of, it was kind of the beginning of Disney World. I mean, they opened up, I think, in 75. And was it 75? Yeah, and I was there in 77. So, and this little area where I worked, it was called the Village, Disney Village, and it had boutiques and lots of restaurants and a real successful beautiful jazz lounge. And then they had this man-made paddle wheeler, on a man-made lake. And we played, it was, it looked authentic inside. And we played in their little holding room because there were 3 restaurants in there. So it was meant to be a place where people could go and have a beer and just be entertained a little bit. Well, it became kind of a hot spot because we were so zany, and we worked with a very zany guy named Denny Zabit, who was just an excellent single. He played guitar. He was very funny. And then we would come up and do our antics. Dave Tobias on ragtime piano, and Tom Bucci on electric bass, and myself on cornet sometimes, but mostly just banjo, and having fun with the audience and talking and it was, and I was a spokesperson, so I was in hog heaven because I like doing that kind of stuff. So it grew in popularity over the years. There were lines out the door. I hate to pat myself on the back, but I'm not really. It was because of the paddle wheeler itself. It was such a unique, steamboat, and people would come for that, and of course the food too. But they would also stand in line to get into the Baton Rouge Lounge, which is where I played. And the more the merrier. We just had. We wrote the show as we went. We never rehearsed. We never did anything except we rehearsed on stage. We'd get requests, and then I'd read them and make fun of them and throw them out and say, oh, this, no thanks. Nope, can't do it today, that kind of thing. But and then we'd do something really off the wall like Staying Alive. And it became a bit, and it was just like 8 bars of the, what was that disco group? I forget now. But I'd have you get that, it was crazy, and but people laughed and it was funny, and so the whole show grew from mostly the audience wanting and requesting things, and if it stuck and if it worked, we would use it routinely.
When you were doing the Empress Lilly, is that where you developed some really pretty serious comedy chops?
Well, I think it was the Warehouse on Cannery Row. I took notes from Bill Dindal, a very funny guy and an incredible banjoist. And he was at the Warehouse when I, first started there, and he had gone a year earlier. But he was very funny, very quick, and very good with the audience and everything. So I was taking notes, and then Bill left to go to San Diego, and I became the leader of the Warehouse band. And then I kind of carried on where he left off and got my own, brand of humor, I guess you might say. It's, I don't know if it's funny or not, but it's laid back, and I don't know. It's, like I say, it's a yin yang thing, so I feed off the audience. But the Empress Lilly, because the shows were kind of more compact, and it was Disney World, and I felt like, hey, this is serious. So we do 4 or 5 shows, I forget exactly, a night, half hour, 45 minutes into that thing. But we would do the same show every night, except for these little things that the audience would, trigger in my head that actually worked. So it was a living, breathing, rewritten show almost every week.
And you were able to keep that fresh, obviously, because of the, like you say, the yin yang, this cycle of energy with the audience. What ultimately got you back into Monterey?
Well, I always called Monterey my home. I was drawn to her first. I fell in love with it in 1969 when I first moved from Santa Clara, and so no matter where I went and lived, Monterey was called home, and I missed it, and my family did too. I missed my folks and my sisters, and my wife missed her folks and everything, and just being on the peninsula where it was cool and foggy, and it just seemed to suit us better than Disney World, even though I love Florida and everything I have, but I can't, the humidity and the heat is, and the bugs, spiders the size of my hand. Eek.
As you were away from Monterey for a number of years, had the city and the music scene changed when you went back in 1984?
Yes, there was a lot more country going on, and I could see the demise of the jazz clubs, which there weren't a lot when I moved in '69, but there were, oh, 10 or so, maybe more. And that had dried up in at least to 5 or 4. And most of it was country and rock and a few jazz situations. And so I was offered to work again with my dear friends, the Abalone Stompers. So I joined that band when I got back in 1984. And we went to festivals, and there's not enough time to tell you about Jake Stock, who was such a character. I mean, there's nobody that I know of and know since then or ever in the future, anybody as unique as Jake. But he was a character and everybody knew him. He was the man of the year a couple of times. And so his band was with Jackie Kuhn, Jackson Stock, who was a great trombone player, Jake's son. Bob Phillips, an incredible piano player. It still just lives down the street from me at 84 now, still playing great. And Alan O'Day on sousaphone, a big guy, now not so big. But it was another experience, a different experience than Disney, that's for sure. It was a little ruder and more, I don't know what to say. It wasn't Disney.
Now, the jazz scene, as you came back into Monterey, it also focused a little more on your guitar. Talk just about how you segued from banjo to guitar, and maybe some of those jazz influences from a guitar that work backwards towards the banjo ultimately.
Yeah, good question. I got the banjo because I saw it hanging in the music store, and I loved the looks of it. And it was this exact Vega tenor that I got for Christmas. And but I was always listening to George Van Epps and Johnny Smith on guitar, Joe Pass, who's wow. But all these great guitarists. I'm probably forgetting a whole bunch, but I really got interested in not doing it. I always got calls on banjo for playing banjo because I was really known for that mostly. But as time went on in the 90s, and I got involved with a jazz party in Tennessee called the Triangle Jazz Party, run by my dear friend still, Steve Blades. And that's where I started picking up the guitar because the jazz parties required both instruments. And it was more of a, the American songbook kind of thing where sometimes banjo wouldn't fit the tune. But I played both, and I was very uncomfortable at first playing, guitar because I haven't had that much public experience. But I got through it, and I learned a whole bunch from all the musicians that I was surrounded by at these jazz parties. I continued being hired to do jazz parties, and that was kind of my main thing for the last, I'd say 20 years or 25 years, is doing jazz parties and festivals. But Dan Barrett, of course, and Rebecca Kilgore and Joel Forbes were forming a group. Becky and I did a recording. It was she called it her dream band. And she called up Matt Domber, who was the owner of Arbor's Records, and asked if she could do a CD of her dream band, which comprised of Jackie Kuhn, my great friend, he played flugelhorn, Dave Frischberg, an incredible pianist and vocalist and composer, Becky, and me. And that was it. And to make a long story obnoxious, the CD never came out. So we had things in the can recorded, but it never came out. And I called up Becky and I said, about 6 months later, I said, why don't we make that good because Matt Domber paid for it. He paid for even though it didn't come out, he paid us. So I said, why don't we make it good? Why don't we make it good for Matt? And we'll just do our own CD, fill in what didn't work with Dave Frischberg and all the gang. And we'll just do a duo and fill in a couple of tunes. And she said, that's a great idea. So we went to Brian Shaw's, which is Dan Barrett's brother-in-law. And he's a great trumpet player, also a great recording studio guy in his own. So we were in the middle of doing that, and Dan Barrett came in and just to listen. And Becky said, you know what, trombone would sound really good right now in this particular song. So he'd get his trombone out. And so he stayed, and it became a trio at that point. And it felt so good, and it sounded so good. Becky and her velvet voice and a beautiful swing, and Dan with his velvet trombone. And, you know, I was in seventh heaven again. And so we started the group BED, B-E-D, Becky, Eddie, and Dan. And then we hired a bass player, an upright bass player. David Stone was on our first CD. And then Joel Forbes took Dave Stone's place. And we went all over the world with BED. We went, to the Ascona Festival in Switzerland, and all over. We went to, Edinburgh and Germany and Ireland and Italy and Australia, New Zealand. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was pinching myself all the way saying, my God, I'm so glad I practiced when I was young, because
in addition to the traveling and the experience with the BED group, you've said that that's the best music you've ever made. You still feel that way?
Well, there's so many different categories of music. I've played in the best, I think, Dixieland players, and just playing in a great Dixieland band, which was a thrill. I would get goosebumps while these giants were playing this wonderful Dixieland music. So what we played in the quartet was so different. So it was a different category of smoother sound. There were no drums. It was just bass, upright bass, guitar, and no piano. So bass, guitar, and banjo, and Becky played when she wanted to play guitar. She plays great rhythm guitar, and I would play the banjo, and then Dan on trombone, and occasionally he'd get over to the piano and play a little bit of that, but mostly on trombone and cornet. Great cornet player. So it was a different sound altogether. I wouldn't say it was the best music that I ever experienced in my career, but in that category of smooth, the American Songbook, and just the salon group, the salon sound, it was intimate. And whereas the Dixieland bands that I loved and got goosebumps with were not so intimate. They're out there playing and giving it all. So I've been lucky to experience, both kinds of music, the real jazzy Dixieland stuff and the smooth American Songbook standards. So I've enjoyed both, and all music, whatever I play, even I play on banjo. What the people will ask, do you know Foggy Mountain Breakdown, or do you know any bluegrass? And I say, well, I have a 4-string banjo and a flat pick, so my bluegrass is going to sound more like crabgrass than bluegrass, But so that always got to. But I would do, we do country tunes, and Big Mama Sue I have to remember to get her in the picture because we still perform together. She's a washboard player and a red hot mama singer, and she's amazing. A great entertainer and a great business person. She got more work for us. And for me, we ended up doing just a duo, the two of us, because of economics. And we did fairs, Washington, Oregon, all the way up the 3 coasts, and I think down in Oregon, in Arizona. And we were on the road a lot.
I love Rebecca. You use velvety vocal.
Yes.
But you're going to be too modest to talk about it, but I'm going to push you a little bit.
Uh-oh.
You've got a really unique vocal sound yourself. And usually musicians, especially multi-instrumentalists, don't necessarily segue into being vocalists as effectively as you have. How did that all come about?
It was a process that I wasn't even aware of. because like at the warehouse I would sing, but it would be like 5'2", I was playing, you know, and I would kind of joke around with my singing and things like that. But I guess I was able to stay on pitch, but I didn't consider myself a singer, nor do I now really. But as time went on and I experienced people like Becky and listening to CDs and LPs of all the great singers, Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett and all the great singers of the day, you know, Johnny Hartford and all those guys. So what I did is unscrewed my head and poured all these people in it and shook my head, and it all became, you know, I guess me. And I really love singing. I love singing more now than I ever did. You know, it's been a real joy and listening to Becky and her phrasing taught me a whole bunch.
You say you retired. Well, I can't accept that. What do you got floating around in your head? What's a musical project you'd like to accomplish?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit before I answer that question. I had a heart problem. I had back in 2015, 5 years ago, I had to have an aortic valve replacement. It took a long time to recover because things went wrong during the operation a little bit, you know, nothing too serious, but tachycardia, and they nicked my lung, and it, you know, I had a collapsed lung, so I had in the hospital. So it took a longer than it would have normally to recover from that. And my body was kind of telling me to slow down. And after I, you know, recovered from that, I didn't slow down, but I remember getting more tired, going to Germany and doing a month-long concerts one night, you know, one a night, sometimes two concerts in a day. And my last concert, my last tour in Germany and Switzerland and all that was 2018 or 19, I forget. And it took me so long to recover from that, from 2000, I think it was 18. And my body was really trying to tell me something, you know, you're getting tired, you can't pack your bags all the time now. So I decided just to call it quits, and, you know, people would call me still for jazz parties and festivals, but I just said, I don't have the energy anymore. So now I'm faced with, what do I do? Who am I? And I'm not putting any pressure on myself, and I don't really have any plans other than, you know, playing on my couch during commercials. Can I show this? Mm-hmm. This is the most incredible thing, most incredible award I have ever received. And I can't thank you enough. But I know that I'll be sparked by something in the not too distant future, because I still have a passion and I miss it. I love playing. I love playing for an audience, and, you know, it's something that's a void in my life that I will fill. But at this point, I don't have any solid plans.
Last question before we let you go. Mm-hmm. The greatest joy that music has brought you?
Meeting people from different places, meeting musicians and their different ways of looking at things, and different audiences in different countries, and playing with just a multitude of different beautiful musicians, instrumentalists, vocalists. I think that's what gives me my chills, and thinking back on it. And I guess with time that I have, I'd have to say that. I would have to say the experience of other musicians and different ways of living in different countries. Yeah.
Eddie, it's really, really a thrill to welcome you to the American Banjo Museum Hall of Fame. Congratulations. You are loved by many, including the guy right in front of your camera here. So congratulations, and thanks for telling us about your life. It's been a thrill.
Johnny, you make me, I'm weeping. I can't help it, but I am more than honored. I don't even know words. As Jake Stock would say, words just don't get it, you know, and that's how I feel. I have such a deep honor in my heart, and I thank you for allowing it to happen. Just thank you.
You are most welcome on behalf of everybody. Thanks, Eddie. Erickson, congratulations.
Thank you.